and your ideas and opinions about the situation. I'm going to briefly introduce you, and please correct me if anything here is wrong. So, Francesca Albanese is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, an international human rights lawyer and scholar. She holds degrees in law from the University of Pisa and a master's in human rights from the University of London. Francesca has extensive experience with the United Nations, including prior work with the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Her scholarship focuses on forced displacement, refugee law, and the legal frameworks governing occupation. She is the co-author of Palestinian Refugees in International Law, published by Oxford in 2020. And Francesca's research and mandate have made her a central figure in contemporary legal debates on international humanitarian law, accountability, and the enduring effects of colonial and military occupation. And she's been a vocal voice across international organizations and Europe to end the war of destruction in Gaza. So what I have just a few more, before we begin, I have a few announcements that I need to tell you. So first of all, I'm going to ask Francesca a few beginning questions, and then people will be invited to ask questions on their own or to write them in the chat, whatever is more comfortable. However, if you speak out or break into the Zoom, then Yuval will mute you. So just know that that's going to happen, and it's not because anybody's silencing a question, but because we have a way in which you can ask it. And another thing is that we have an important event at Hebrew University, the 10th of June, that will be to showcase the report on silencing in academia. So we call it Doha Ashtaka, Doha Redifa Ba'Akademia, and it's going to be at Hebrew University at the 10th of June, and you'll have more details coming soon. Okay, so Francesca, hi.
Hello, thanks for having me. Seriously, it's a pleasure and it's an honor. Also, it's nice to be introduced with not just with the usual funny words, are you this and are you that? So, you know, it's nice. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions. We spoke a little bit briefly yesterday, and there's also some questions that came up from our members. And people are very interested to know, as you speak to member states and policymakers in Europe, what seems to work when you are convincing people that international intervention is needed in this situation? So if you can speak also to the challenges, but also to the things that you've seen that might be moving in the right direction. We have one member that has talked about the Netherlands and a slight movement that she sees recently. So that's one important question. And and the second thing that people are interested in is what kind of actual intervention can be effective that Israelis and Palestinians from within Israel-Palestine call for.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what do I encounter when I meet policymakers, especially from what I call the global minority? In 2 words, cognitive dissonance. They don't get it. They don't understand what's happening to Palestine, the Palestinians, the Israelis. They simply don't get it. There is a huge sense of denialism. I'm not being hyperbolic. I mean it. Because one way or another, especially, I mean, I speak to member states across the world, and never, as like in the last 20 months, I've encountered so much polarization in a political spectrum at the international level, which was already very polarized. It has always been very polarized. And it's not helpful because, as I've said, the first thing I've said after October 7, with all the pain that it caused, I said, this is the moment, this atrocious moment. This is the time to use wisdom and compassion. And I was not talking to the Israelis or to the Palestinians. I was talking to member states because this is my audience. They've acted in complete denial of many facts, but also what is more serious for me from an international law point of view, international law. They remain largely deaf to what international law has to say about that. However, we can elaborate upon that and the argument I'm trying to make, because it will be relevant as I talk to you as a powerful ally, and I hope, and a necessary ally, and as I hope you see me as a not powerful, but as an ally. So, policymakers, do I see anything convincing? Not really. When I speak to policymakers, you have to understand that in Europe, I'm extremely controversial, but not controversial because of what Israel accuses me of being an anti-Semitic or being pro-terrorism. You know that these are the allegations that are leveled against anyone. It's not because of that. It's because I speak of their obligations and they complain about me because I don't only focus on Israel, I go straight to the other huge problem, which is the impunity that has been granted to Israel, which it didn't start in October 2023. And I go to Ireland, I go to Norway, those countries that are notoriously known to be friends of Palestine, and the message I convey in reminding them of their obligations is, with these friends who need enemies, you know? So I provoke a strong reaction. They complain a lot, but doesn't matter, because eventually this is what we need to do. In general, power and human beings as also components of power are very change resistant. This is a time that requires change. This is a time that requires vision. And the current political leadership, at least in the West, is not ready for that. Although there are cracks in the wall. I agree with the mention, what you said, that there are changes. For example, in the Netherlands, this is where I think that I have contributed to make a change. I have, as I decided to do at the beginning of my mandate, is that I've not concentrated on chronicling the facts that were happening, although I have done that already in the past 19 months. But I've tried to give the full picture, like the self-determination is critical to the resolution of the question of what they called Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And it's not about two states or one state. It's about the Palestinians' right to exist as a people. So I've tried to bring this to their attention. I've tried to bring the fact that they can join Israel as much as they want to call Palestinians who are mass arrested and detained terrorists. But then let's look at the reason why Israel arrested and detained Palestinians en masse. Again, this was also true before October 7, and so on and so forth. And now the question of genocide, or before the question of apartheid. So I've contributed to create a shift, both inside the United Nations and at the international level. Of course, I'm not alone. And this is where it comes to where I see you making a difference. Look, I've noticed, and I know for a fact, I was discussing this with Yael yesterday. There is a complete disconnection of the public discourse and the media when it comes to what's happening inside Israel. And the fact that there have been increasing protests and people taking the streets, doesn't matter what's happening in Gaza. What matters is that there are people wanting to stop that. And the fact that this doesn't appear in the media, doesn't register with the political discourse, this is a problem that we need to address all together. And I hope that we will start discussing how to do that.
Great, thank you. So before I move to the questions that are being asked in the chat, or you could also raise your hand to ask it in your voice, I have another question about how you deal with very strong allegations against you about anti-Semitism or anti-Israelism, and in an attempt. So I mean, we all were both, I think, pleased but shocked that you did receive this new appointment for another 3 years, because as many others, there was this question, you know, how is that even possible with all this criticism? So I want to ask you, I want to ask you also about how you think that happened, but also how that feels and how you deal with this kind of onslaught of criticism that many times has nothing to do with what you're actually doing or working on.
Yeah, look, I'm compelled to remind a dear friend, I'm sure not to me only, who's not longer with us, and I continue to look at as a lighthouse for how, because he has really taught me, together with others, and some of them, I know that they don't want to be mentioned, Amos Goldberg. I mean, I've really learned from some of you how to deal with this, because the first time I was accused of anti-Semitism in a public smearing campaign, I was so shocked that for hours I couldn't open my mouth. I remember this feeling of suffocation. How it's possible? Me, I mean, looking behind and what I had done. As a European, it's very heavy. And plus, I mean, I'm someone who really comes from a place where my basic training since I was little was about what my ancestors had done. So I started questioning myself, and then this was the time, and I said, probably there is something I do that I've done that I don't see. See, it's true. In 2014, I said Jewish lobby, and I'm so sorry, but the man Taipak and people in the US, I'm sorry, I was living there, but then people said the Jewish lobby, it's wrong. It's wrong, but does the fact that I used the wrong word does it make an anti-Semite of me? And this is where Alon told me, Francesca, this is normal. Welcome to anyone who talks about Palestine, and the way you do is either an anti-Semite or a self-hating Jew. Don't clarify, distance yourself from those words, which were clearly infelicitous. You shouldn't have said it. You should have known better. But now you educate yourself and stay strong, because it has nothing to do about you. It's a tactic of deflection. And I did it. And then there have been other things that have happened. You know how much it meant to me that, the people who defended me from the beginning, and I'm not saying that as to share my personal history, but because there is a lesson to draw from that, where Jewish people, including you, including Academia for Equality, issued a communication signed by 60 scholars defending me. And so it has been the same. And the more I've gone through this difficult time, the more I realize that it's so intuitive, the connection between me, my mandate, and Jewish communities in the diaspora, for example. See, in the past 19 months, I've completely interrupted, other than at the individual level, my engagement with groups and organizations in Israel. But it was not my choice. I mean, human rights organizations and others, including organizations that were not anti-Zionist, didn't engage with me anymore because it was not opportune anymore. No, it doesn't matter. But what I can tell you is that over time, as I've traveled from Australia to New Zealand to Canada, I've always, the first to invite me were Jewish groups, always. And so this is the first thing. We are allies. And what does, I mean, not, we need to seek for, not to be defined by what the smear campaigns tell about us. This is the time to stick to our principles. And this is what I'm trying to do, which doesn't mean that I do everything right. I mean, I've not been particularly diplomatic with certain member states because I developed zero tolerance for their hypocrisy. But look, this is also the result of the fatigue of seeing children and their mothers and fathers slaughtered day in and day out. Now, going to the other part of your question, how did you survive for a second term as a special rapporteur? This is an interesting question because I can tell you, I was so ready to let it go because, I mean, let's be honest, I'm serving the United Nations for free, getting death threats, all sorts of insults. In Italy, I mean, there are still more people who love me rather than not, but still, I didn't want this. I was not looking for this being notorious in the middle of a genocide, because for me, it's a genocide, and then we can talk about that. But so, it's so disconcerting. And when UN Watch, the usual, started a new campaign against me, you know what I did? I took the car and I went with my family up to the mountain because I said, enough, they want to take this mandate away from me. Welcome. I have other things to do in life. And this was the interesting thing, that all the brouhaha in France, in Germany, in the Netherlands, in the US, apart from the US, didn't translate in any request for a vote of confidence, for a vote on the renewal of my mandate, which then it got automatically renewed because there had been a consideration of all the complaints about me, whether I had been in breach of the code of conduct, and the result was no, but there was a sort of kind reminder that I should stop issuing political statements. Okay, I said, okay, I will. And then my life continued. So the lesson learned here is that stay put, continue doing what you're doing. The rest is distraction, is noise. And there is something, again, the fact that I'm still here means there is still hope, because the pressure that the US has put on the United Nations, including, I mean, putting black on white, we are going to cut you the funds if you don't remove this person from this voluntary mandate, by the way. So this is where we are.
So I wanna let Majid ask his question. I think he'll probably put it better than myself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear
Yes.
you. Okay, excellent. Thank you for organizing this meeting, and thanks, Francesca, for all your work. My main concern with international law, as we know it critically, like who put it in place, how it was used historically, is very important to think about. You know, who put international law in quotation mark internationally? These are Western countries that implemented a structure, a global structure that went after people outside of the West. You have criminal history of the US in wars. None of them was really taken to court or punished for presidents. Went to Vietnam, wars, Korea, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and you name it. And the same thing with other countries, even today. I mean, the war in Israel, as I argue in my talks and in my writing, Israel is a Western outpost in the region. All the war is practiced not just financially and arms, but even on the ground, there are many soldiers from a lot of these countries, and many countries are participating in these wars. So how could we take these countries who are in, Israel is part of the Western structure, how could we take them to court, international court, etc., when the system itself was built to protect them and go after Africans and Asians, etc.? So I think it's important to raise what you are doing, and thank you for all your work. But it's also to be critical that the system is a racist system that was put in place to go after, or not just to go after, to maintain Western hegemony. We saw African leaders, etc., going to courts, but not Israel, not Germany, not the US, not France, not even Italy.
Thank you very much. But I just want to add, there's a few more people that have elaborated on this question. So Ophira asks, so beyond the critique of international law, how in this case, how do you enforce ICC and ICJ court decisions? And how do you navigate the international organizations that have these colonial histories? That is another question that is adjacent.
Very good, very good. So first of all, I have to say, is the international law that unique in resenting the colonial nature of the structure of powers that was at the origins of this forming? What about architecture? What about medicine? Are we sure that international law is the only discipline that needs to undergo scrutiny? And not because I don't think that this shouldn't be done, but because we need to accept that racism, as Rassigal says, is intrinsic. It's a legacy that we continue to drag with us. Ras once told me, he says, you know, the critical thing is that the idea of the pure race was not conceived by Hitler, but it didn't die with Hitler. And it didn't die with Hitler. And surely so, if we look, I often say 500 years of European colonialism have so deeply marked our DNA of Western societies. And it seems to me, and it's hard to deal with. I mean, the way we deal with, as Europeans, the way we deal with the Palestinians, the way we look at the Palestinians, and yes, Majid, I agree with you that Europeans look at Israel as a Western outpost, but do you see how dehumanizing this is? Even conceiving, speculating, exploiting the tragedy of a people in order to turn them into something that it serves your interest as Western powers, including the United States, have done historically. How tragic it is. But however, I think that I'm all with you when it comes to considering international the colonial legacy that still persists in international law, but reject the fact that this is simply a tool and remains a tool of dispossession and depredation, because that's not true. And especially when it comes to atrocity crimes, the fact that they are criminalized is because they were atrocities that at a certain point disgusted the humanity in power. And the fact that there are human rights is codified. It's not because at a certain point member states say, you know, let me give some gifts to my citizens or the residents in my countries. No, it's because human rights eventually are the codification of people's struggles, from the struggle to abolish slavery. And you can say, yes, but slave trade was no longer convenient. Fine, but there was a sensitivity that started with the first civil society movement against it. And so it was against apartheid and the movement for workers' rights and women's rights and so on and so forth. Now, it's an unfinished job. And this is the other misconception. International law is a tool. It's a set of rules that member states have established. So what happened at the domestic level meaning the states give themselves as rules to the social contract, so it happens at the international level. The point is that if we had the level of lawlessness at the domestic level that we have at the international level, it would be, I wouldn't say a jungle, because a jungle has its own rules, even if we human beings don't understand it. It would be complete chaos and lawlessness. And it comes to my second point. So yes, I critique the system, but I also know that the standards are good. The problem is not with the law, the way it's written. It's the way it's enforced. So what I think now is that Palestine and what is happening to Gaza, but also look at the rest of the West Bank. I mean, how many of you, and I know that there are among you people who go in the middle of the night to the West Bank to interpose themselves between violent settlers and the Palestinian shepherds. So Palestine today is a revealer that the world order as it was fallacious, was faulty in so many ways, and it has provoked a fall of the masks. I think that there is a transformation of Israel's apartheid regime into the current lethal machine and mass displacement. But here is the test. How are we going to survive this? I think that the world changed after the Nazi fascist genocide. It did. It took a genocide and many years later to understand the persecution that Jewish people had suffered at the hands of Europeans, from Spain to Russia. And so this could be that changing point, that transformation. As the philosopher says, we are suspended between the hope and before I used to say the abyss, and now the metamorphosis. We are into this. And how to navigate a system which is colonial. This is my challenge, because the system is really colonial. The United Nations, very hard to break certain patterns, because the colonialism is not just a way to control land, resources, and people. It's also something that enters in your mind, that builds barriers where there shouldn't be. And so now it's inside the system. For example, I just give you this example, and then I will leave space to move to other questions. But I'm investigating the private sectors. And now I really understand. I mean, I knew before becoming a special rapporteur that the Western support for Israel had nothing to do with the sense of guilt. We are collectively incapable of harboring guilt, because if we had an inch of guilt for what we have done in the past to the Jewish people, to the Roma and Sinti, to other minorities, indigenous people which didn't conform to the pure race, white, Christian, male, blah, 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 and what we have done to other colonized people. If we had an inch of guilt, we would be in a different place. We don't have guilt. It's private interest. And again, colonialism and capitalism go together. The exploitation of land and resources reveal, and the fact that today there are movements that are repressed. You and those who resist in Israel against the war in Gaza, the occupation, the apartheid, are invisibilized. And people around the world who fight against the genocide are either criminalized or punished, arrested, deported. What is this? And here's when I say the revealer. This is the system. This is the real legacy of the imperial system that has evolved through the centuries of capitalism. And today it's militarized and it has artificial intelligence in its sense. So it's going to be very tough if we do not understand how to fight the system, which is united. United. We really need to stay united as human beings. It's as simple as that. And but for me, it's really about speaking love. It's like the Rabbi Ali Savai says, the solidarity, which is what needs to drive us today, is the political declination of love. It sounds cheesy, but this is the lesson we need to discover, including through the interpretation of the rules and how to make. And so we have the standards, the mechanisms are not functioning. We still have courts, and it is starting. It's starting. There are cases in Europe where litigation has been brought against political leaders, the UK government, the Dutch government, and the Danish government. These are cases where sometimes you win even when you lose, because you create a sort of awareness. But also the private sector, as I was saying, banks, pension funds, charities. I mean, they're all implicated in what I call the economy of the occupation, which has turned into something else, something much worse. And these people have to be, these organizations and their executives have to be held accountable. This is what I'm working on at the moment.
Thank you. I have one smaller question, more specific, and then a few questions that keep coming up and keep coming up. The smaller question is, what do you make of the allegation as somebody that worked for UNRWA? What do you make of Israel's allegations against the organization and the practices, laws, and different mechanisms against it? So that's one question. And the second one that keeps coming up is, what can Israelis do? What can people on the Jewish left around the world do? Is there any specific power there? Or are there also things that we shouldn't do? So there's a lot of asking about the role that Israelis can play in resistance.
Wow. Yeah. So what?
Well, first UNRWA, I think we'll get that out of the way.
Yeah. Sorry, I was sort of taken by surprise with what Israelis shouldn't do, because this is not the right venue to say don't kill, but it's not the right group.
No, but it's specifically about Israeli academics, Israeli left, Jewish left, Israelis abroad.
It's a lot, and I'm really happy to be sharing what I think from my perspective, because I've seen a lot of what Jewish communities can do in countries, primarily in the West. And then I will tell you also the struggle I have in the Arab world. So let's unpack this, but UNRWA first. When I was with UNRWA, I hope I understood the question correctly, but when I was with UNRWA, this was already during the phase that UNRWA had started being significantly attacked by various governments with a number of allegations. There have been constant audits on UNRWA, or what it was doing. And I cannot rule out that there were instances of anti-Semitism. I mean, UNRWA uses textbooks that are from like Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel is not even named. I mean, as I worked for a Jordanian organization, it took me 1 year to convince my colleague to stop using the term Zionist entity. I said, guys, you are ridiculous, really ridiculous, because your country has a peace agreement with Israel. It makes no sense. I mean, you need to engage, you need to maturely engage with the question. So, of course, there were statements against the Zion entity as it was in the books, but UNRWA's curricula have been scrutinized over and over. So it has been my assessment, and also based on various commissions of inquiry and audits, is that there has been a constant attempt to delegitimize UNRWA, because UNRWA was seen as the organization which continued to maintain the illusion of the right of return. And so it has been undermined in different ways. Now, after October 7th, it's interesting, the timing, because UNRWA came under strong attack the day the ICJ issued its provisional measures, recognizing the risk of permanent harm, irreparable harm to the rights of the Palestinians protected under the Genocide Convention. So recognize the risk of the plausible risk of genocide. Can you please close the door? The plausible risk of genocide. Sorry, I have a young child who's a bit agitated tonight. And so on that day, the Israeli government issued a communication that UNRWA staff members had taken part in the atrocities of October 7. And here was my question. I had no elements back then to say this is not true. Like, I do not have all the elements today. I've seen the various investigations that have been concluded, and there is no conclusive evidence. Nonetheless, UNRWA has fired like between 12 and 19 people. Now I don't remember. However, the point is, and without evidence, which is against UNRWA rules. Now, the demonization of UNRWA that has started after this is interesting, because I say, if you have like nurses or doctors like involved, anyone, but even scholars committing a crime, does it undermine or does it bring shame on the entire organization the culprit belongs to? Because this is what has happened to UNRWA. It's impossible to speak of UNRWA now other than it's an organization that supports terror. And again, this is where it has lost support of most European countries. I also don't think that UNRWA has done a very good job at protecting itself, protecting Palestinian refugees and etc. So, but this is such a blow for the multilateral system, because it's again, the question of the rights of Palestinian refugees is not undermined much by the existence or non-existence of UNRWA. It's the practicalities right now. It's that UNRWA has the capacity to allow the continuity of Palestinians' life, really life as on a survival mode, but also life as a collective life in what remains of Palestine. And the killing UNRWA in the occupied Palestinian territory is yet another tool to eradicate the Palestinians. Then, when it comes, I hope I answered the question. Now, when it comes to what Israelis can do, well, look, first of all, I think that what I see many, especially young people, doing is phenomenal, is necessary to continue to stand against this lawlessness. Because eventually this is about, I mean, I think I say that with a lot of respect, but this is who you are as a society. And as Amos wrote in one of his articles, this is a stain that is going to be on the Israeli societies. I think that it's already done. The harm is already done, but it's necessary to act against it to lay the foundations of something else. If there is the possibility today for Israelis and to live in Germany, there is the possibility, or in Europe in general, there is the possibility, and for the Jewish people to be protected in Europe, there is the possibility of a peaceful future between the river and the sea. But it's human beings who goes through that, who lay the foundation for that. So my first, if I were Israeli, I would do what many, but not as many as needed do, and go as much as possible where Palestinians come under attack. Because this is so important. And by the way, and this is what I wanted to share.
You mean protective presence? Oh, right.
Protective presence. Yes, yeah. Yes. This is what I mean. Yeah. I tried to organize an event here in Tunis with Eyal Weizman, who's renowned for his work, and we have done a lot of presentations together on the forensic, because we do work together. I've learned so much from his work, and he has also used my work. So it has been teamwork, and between his organization and my mandate. And so we have presented various times the forensic and legal understanding of a genocide. And I wanted to organize this event in Tunisia, where I've been living for almost 4 years, and where people love me. And many of my friends who belong to the human rights community were elated because they know the work of Eyal, because Tunisians are really progressive, are the most progressive in the region. And so we say, yeah, let's do that, but you have to be ready, because here people are even beyond the BDS. BDS doesn't discriminate on the ground of nationality, but on institutional ground. Here, I was told, and we have delayed the event because they say we cannot have an Israeli here. I say, why? Why? If this is not a person who's fighting for getting out of this, whom do you want to engage? Plus, there are so many Israelis, and this was my argument. This is why I'm sharing this with you. There are Israelis who are out there protecting the Palestinians through physical presence, while there are the PA is not doing that. And also there are so many Arabs in the region who are not even following what happens to the Palestinians. So can we stop this identity politics, who frankly I've reached the limit, and can we look at each other as human beings? So there is a lot of work to be done, but so for me, eventually what matters is what the Palestinians feel and what you feel, and creating this bond at this critical time is fundamental. The second thing is use your academic connections to be heard more because these, the fact of being Israeli today is, from my perspective, I might be wrong, there is no empirical evidence, but gives you, in certain places, more power than being a German Jew, for example. I've seen German Jews completely silenced and ostracized as much as German Palestinians and others. With Israelis, it's a little bit better. And so I would say use the fact that you are Israelis to make your voice heard in places where there is this conflation between anti-Semitism and standing against blah, blah, blah. When you ask me, how do you deal with the criticism of being anti-Israelis? Look, or anti-Semitic. I say, look, for me, apart from the fact that this is really, anti-Semitism is disgusting, and unfortunately, it will continue to be on the rise if the Israelis and the Jewish people continue to be associated to this little design that the government Netanyahu is pushing for. And the perception outside is that Israel is a monolith. Yes, there are a few fringy leftists, but it's very small, and no one is talking about how the movement is growing, how many young people are part of it, etc. So I think that you, because of your academic position, are probably facilitated in reaching out, and there is a need to be more present in the European and Western debate. And then again, I don't know, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult, but I do feel that there are alliances to build in uncharted territory. The reason why, for me, it would be such a strategic, revolutionary move to have someone like Eyal here. It's not because it is Israeli, but because of the kind of path he has behind himself, and he could talk to the Jewish community in Tunisia, which is totally pro-Israel. He would break the stereotype that the Jewish people and Israelis are not safe in the Arab region, which might not be false everywhere, but surely not. So it's a way to rehumanize our human contacts, and also to launch a message to people in the Arab region who do much less than many Israelis these days. I don't know if it helps.
Yeah, I think it's great, and more questions are coming. I just want to put together the questions of Maha and Yael. So both are basically asking if that you said that Palestine is a revealer, and actually there's a lot more scrutiny of international law. Do you think that this moment can bring about significant change in international law, or Maha asks in structures of oppression and colonialism? Like, what is the potential you see in this in the revelation that is provided at this moment?
Look, I'm not a real, I mean, I situate myself as someone who joined the academia pretty late, but still with a clear attitude, with a clear posture toward international law, in what is called the TWAIL approach, the third world approach to international law, which is a critical approach. And but at the same time, as I said, it's what's the purpose of throwing the baby away with the dirty water? So yes, let's criticize, but also let's see what is good of the system and to be used. So for me, rather than hope, it's about discipline. Having the discipline of making things work, of making wrong right. And I know that together we can do that, totally, because we are the global majority. The thing is that, especially in the part of the world I belong to and beyond, we need to make sacrifices. We cannot continue to think business as usual. Yes, there is the possibility for a transformation, but we need to, and I do see that, for example, again, as I said, I'm not a scholar of colonialism. I've also understood what colonialism was by studying the history, because my focus has always been the Middle East, by also looking at Palestine. And although it's a sui generis experience, yes, but there was a settler colonial project, and it has happened. Sui generis as we want it to be. It has happened. And again, happy to elaborate about that. So never before I've seen this awareness. First of all, from a human rights point of view, knowing that human rights are, again, it's an uphill struggle. For me, it's already a victory to hear so many people around the world speaking the language of international law, even when they criticize, and having high expectations on human rights. For me, this is a success in itself, because eventually this is a way to seek accountability from the government, the other thing is that it's about justiciability. And the need now is to bring these, to make this, to activate the defensive power of these rights, meaning using them not just as a shield, but as a sword. Actually, not defensive, but defensive in a more proactive way. And this is why I call for strategic litigation where it's needed. And there was, sorry, one more thing that I wanted to say. I think I forgot. Sorry, I forgot.
Okay, before I want to let Ahmed ask the question. I have a question here from Uli Davies, and who's asking about, it's very specific, what procedure would one have to follow in order to get the Blue Beret, the UN Army, to arrive in the Gaza Strip in defense of Palestinians today? So, yeah.
The UN Army.
Yeah, the Blue Beret.
The blue helmet.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to happen very soon, because again, I think that it's important. I've been asking for a protective presence since the very first day of my mandate, because I think that this is needed. You need interposition between the army and the Palestinians, between the settlers and the Palestinians. I mean, it's so shocking. Now I'm trying to reflect on the kind of status that armed settlers have, because again, I mean, but I know that this is a dangerous path. I don't want to get into who can be killed. no one should be killed. Not even people who are, because I think that also these settlers, I mean, when these armed settlers, there is something completely twisted. There is, they look deranged. This is not normal. This is not the product of a healthy society. And then I dig and I see that actually those who have been sent into the yeshiva schools in the West Bank were also youth with some issues. And again, I say, oh my God, look at how many people, not just the Palestinians, have become pawns, like political pawns in the hand of an ideology that has turned into a political doctrine. So I think it's very important to ask for it. And for example, I've never heard Israelis asking for that. What's coming out is the boycott from within. This, yes, but I'm also exposed. This is my algorithm. I'm exposed to what comes from you, but I have an idea. I have an idea if you are open to it. And then so asking for it. It's necessary to write a letter, collect signatures. For example, I remember that in October, in September 2023, there was this letter concerning apartheid that had been signed by so many Israelis. And this is the critical thing. I do believe that there was a turning point there was greater understanding of what apartheid was. And somewhat we have been thrown into uncharted territory. But I think that it's a very valid thing that is not going to happen very easily, because the United States will always pose a veto. Because the United States doesn't listen to you. The United States listen to the evangelical Christians, the AIPAC, and so on and so forth. So it's not going to happen that easily, but we need to keep on asking to create that sense that protection is needed.
Ahmad? I think can you
hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm doing research on the legal consciousness of Egyptians when it comes to the BDS movement. So why they participate in the BDS movement and their ideologies towards international law, human rights law, and their motivations in participating in the boycott movement. From what I gather is that they want to use it as a form of, I guess, informal legal mobilization. So they want to try to change legal policies, laws outside of like Egypt, obviously, through the boycott. Now, I guess my question is, what do you think of the BDS movement as a tool? Because like it was asked before, like there is no structure, a mechanism for normal people to sort of grapple with or disagree with international law, other than informal grassroots movements like these that to my understanding. Do you think this is another question, but maybe a time to maybe look at international law and not restructure it, but include the opinions of actors other than states? Does that make sense?
I wish. But there are. You would be surprised because, in fact, in the human look, the UN is a huge dinosaur type of bureaucracy, and it's mainly 99%. I mean, not 99%, but 90% of it is either political or political under travesty, in the sense development cooperation, SDGs, humanitarian aid, but the human rights, the human rights component, the part I really like of the system, it's very small, it's isolated in Geneva. When you talk to people to embassies, to ambassadors in New York, because in New York there is the part of the UN which deals with political matters. In Geneva, human rights. So it seems that when you talk about human rights, I say, go to talk to my younger brothers. And so the system itself is not coherent. So the reform of the UN, of course, it's necessary, but how do you get there? How do you get there when you have a system? This is the colonial, but it's not even the colonial legacy, because the legacy, the problem in the UN, first and foremost, is with the veto power that rests in the hands of five states, and it's not necessarily to do with colonialism. Of course, the US, the UK, and France had all the colonial history or colonial ties, or were the outcome of colonialism, like the US. But there were China and Russia. It was the countries who won the Second World War. And this is something that needs to be overcome. But it's not going to happen now. And at the same time, I think that it's important to preserve and to protect the United Nations as a platform that has not served everyone in the same way. I think the Western people have been favored and have profited from it more than others, because the stability that is coming very close to us here in Europe in particular, it's unprecedented. We have never felt it so close. It's not just because of the war in Ukraine, it's also because of what is happening in the Middle East. And so yes, on the one hand, I think that there should be reform, but again, it's not international law per se right now can help us really the way it is. And think, for example, of businesses. Again, maybe because my focus is there, but there are enterprises, corporations who have more power than states. And it's not the case that while being the drive or the enabler of colonial processes, because this is what has happened since we call the discovery of America, they have never been really legislated. The first time where businesses and corporations started to fall under a sort of a regulatory umbrella was with the industrialized trials of post-Holocaust. So you see, there are things that happen. So international law does change. The sensitivity change, the interpretation change, and also the capacity of member states to legislate. And it's happening very, very slowly. What we have right now, in my view, is enough to stop the genocide, stop the occupation, which has been declared unlawful, not because it violates international law here and there, but because it's tantamount to what is said other than by words by the International Court of Justice, a form of aggression, because it translates into annexation, acquisition of land by force. So it's unlawful. There shouldn't be any engagement with the occupation, all the more at the time of atrocity crimes committed. However, what I think is interesting is, sorry, Ahmed, I'm not sure I understood the question concerning Egypt. What I know is that the BDS is equally objected and equally mistreated in both the West and the Arab world, for example. There was an activist, a BDS activist, who was arrested last week in Jordan. Is not even the first. I mean, Arab countries, apart from Tunisia and Algeria, have really generally repressed pro-solidarity movements. What does it tell us? What does it tell us? That there is one system that cuts across the transnational, the national boundaries, and there are interests connected to maintaining power, to oligarchs in power, and the power structures that support them. The most of the time are connected to financial interest, military, technology, finance. This is why the change is there. If we manage to understand that uniting various struggles the struggle of workers who have a precarious status and cannot do much either for them and for the others, or the climate justice movement. This could be united, connected, and I mean, I do see the dots. Now, one thing is, I don't agree that, unless I misunderstood your question, BDS is not in disagreement with international law. In fact, BDS is premised upon international law. It calls for the application of international law. But the BDS was born after an ICJ advisory opinion that 21 years ago declared the construction of the wall inside the West Bank unlawful. Has anyone, or illegal because it violated the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people. Has any member state acted upon it? No. And this is where the BDS took the initiative to create this solidarity movement that for me is strategic because it's Palestinian-led. And at the international level, the Palestinian political landscape is so fragmented. It's not coincidental. Once again, Yael Berda has written about that. It has been intentionally fragilized from within in order not to represent a threat. But however, it's the reality. So it's important to have a Palestine-led movement, which is strongly premised upon international law. What do I think of it? I think that it's exercise of freedom of expression and the right to dissent and the right to influence a political process, again, because we are so disempowered also at the state level. Bringing the power back to the citizens, at least as consumers, is fundamental. But because this is effective, it's being highly even criminalized in certain states. But I think it's a good thing.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have, Yael reminds us that in October, almost 4,000 Israelis signed a call, and she put it in the chat, because most people here signed actually, that is Israeli citizens that are calling for immediate intervention and the implementation of every possible sanction. How could that call, I mean, 4,000 Israelis is a lot for that kind of language. How do you think that could be used at this moment?
I think that it's very important to explore how to make this call heard at the political level. Do you have the possibility, and it shouldn't be difficult, but the possibility of bringing these, for example, to the European Parliament, or there is a network that now exists, and it's incredible because I've been part of its constitution, but there is a network of Jewish organizations inside Europe that is also present at the European level. And since their constitution, I've been very active with them. But also there are progressive Jewish groups in many European countries. It's necessary to establish contacts with them because they can amplify your calls, your messages, breaking the wall of silence that the media still represent. I can definitely help with that, but I'm sure you have plenty of contacts. The other thing is that if you are open to this, if you are interested, the reason why I became sort of a bit of an odd element in the UN is because I intentionally do not behave like a typical UN person. I've been for 10 years with the UN. I've never been noticed once. I was completely anonymous because this is what the UN bureaucracy paid me for. But as I'm not paid, I can leave also some of my creativity shine through the system. And this is why I've used, for example, social media in a creative way, which has attracted journalists and others. Of course, I stick to the fact, I stick to international law. Yes, some of my statements might be taken as political, but eventually it's fact and law. And I think that if you were able to be more present, for example, giving interviews to the BBC, to Sky News, to Al Jazeera, and participating in podcasts, for example. There are certain podcasts which are very conservative platforms and have invited me. I'm sure they would be delighted to invite you. Like The Rest is Politics. This is something that is going to make people think. I mean, what I'm encouraging you to do is to be more present at the international level, because so much has been done by organizations like B'Tselem and Breaking the Silence, while there are other organizations that probably do even more visible or important work inside Israel itself. I'm thinking of ACRI or Adala, but it's these organizations that have little by little contributed to portray another kind, or to portray what was happening on the ground. So I think that what you represent is missing, because you represent something that is really missing, because it's either the military or the settlers or the NGOs. But here there is a variety of intellectuals, scholars, but eventually people who live as ordinary citizens and want I think it's important to have your voice heard.
Thank you. I have Nadine is asking about the relationship to the treatment of Palestinian citizens of Israel as part of the broader structure of control and fragmentation, and how is that related? How is the treatment of Palestinians inside the recognized borders of Israel connected to its policies towards Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank?
No, it's not. I mean, this is one, when it comes to cognitive dissonance, for people outside the region, it's very difficult to explain, for example, that the Gazawi are not enough people in the world. They are part of the Palestinian people. So the Palestinians are so fragmented in our perception, in our Orientalist reading of the reality, that we have assumptions. So the assumption is that there are no issues for Palestinians living inside Israel, Palestinian Israeli citizenship, because they have the citizenship, so they are treated as equal. I mean, this is not my expertise, but I'm familiar with some of the issues historically ongoing and recent, and this is another topic that is never really unpacked.
Okay, great. I want to just give everyone a heads up. I mean, we are scheduled to stay till about 10:10 or 10:15, so we still have time. So if you want to ask questions in your voice or just send them in the chat in any language, then you can do that. But I have some follow-up questions for you, and some that are kind of trying to summarize some issues in the chat. So there's a lot of interest in how people can help you do your work. There's a lot of gratitude and thank yous in the chat too about being who you are and doing your work. And there's also a question about your experiences as a woman in this terrain, and how you see her. Can you comment on that experience? One last question is, we talked a lot about the legal and about grassroots. What do you see in terms of gaining in terms of the diplomatic? Are there practices or things that people can do that are related to diplomats?
I call this era the end of diplomacy, but I'll, yeah, come back to this. And first of all, thank you very much for the words of support. It means a lot to me. I mean, when I spoke with Yael yesterday, I said, don't worry, let people ask questions, because I mean, even if there are people who are really upset with me, I can handle it. I understand this is not the crowd, but however, thank you so much. It's interesting that you asked me how it feels to be a woman in this position, because now I'm going to vent. The misogyny that I've registered among my super enlightened fellow Europeans since the beginning of my mandate. Oof, I could write an encyclopedia on that, not an encyclopedia, but I could write a nice, interesting naming shaming pamphlet. People shouted me. I've heard really, and now once I finish this mandate, I will put it on record. I had a minister shouting at me for saying, your pension fund is, your pension fund is investing so much money in the occupation. This is very problematic. What do you want? That we boycott Israel? No, but you have to divest. Otherwise, you will incur in state responsibility. And there are also liability to when violations amount to crimes. So I've had all sorts of issues, or the level of condescendence, and more in Western countries than abroad. At least in the Arab region, I mean, they might not care about what I say ultimately, and they do get offended so much. But then it doesn't matter if I'm a woman, or they were very offended by Richard Falk for hinting that Egypt was also enforcing the blockade. So of course they are upset with me, but at least they listened to me. I went to Egypt complaining about the fact that there were companies charging the Palestinians going out, that who had been cleared by Hamas, by the Israelis, by the Qatari, were crossing Rafah to go into Egypt. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they've been charged between $1,500 per person to 7,000. So it's incredible. And I've raised it with the Egyptians. So at least they've listened and they've been respectful. While, yeah, the level of misogyny in the United States and in Europe has been significant. How do I deal with it? I don't care. Seriously, it's not about me. It's about them. I've learned that fragile male ego is a pathology that affects many societies, and I will not be the cure. This is the thing. Fragile male ego. And by the way, this is the funniest things come from Israelis. This was my friend, Daniel Levy, who told me that one day. Learn how to spot it. So how you can help me? I think I'll let you know. In the past, I've let you know how to. I mean, yeah. For example, the first letter was phenomenal. Now I reached the point where I really would like everyone not to worry about me, because although I think that it's very important that in the I say human rights movement, not in an activist way, but because I think that we are like a movement of light which tries to resist all this darkness, all this nothing, all this killing of every value that advances toward us. And in this respect, I think we need to stick together. So for me, for example, defending anyone, taking a humanist approach is good for me and for the others. Today, I was in a discussion, and there was an Israeli speaker who's incredible. He's not known in the Israel-Palestine debate, but it was phenomenal because of the work he's been doing, and he got a bit of a pushback, and then I felt compelled to speak out and stand and support what he was saying. although he took it less personally than me, clearly, because he said, look, I'm very new and I need to learn how to manage also the emotions, but I understand that the Palestinian who has lost everything in Gaza and listens to me speaking from Tel Aviv or from Beersheba might have this reaction. And this is so again, this is what humanity is about. So I think that what we could do together is create moments for this discussion to be more open, to be accessible to others. For example, I will start soon a podcast for the United Nations. It's just for the diplomatic community. So, and I would love to have you, one of you or a group of you meeting talking to me, and then we would and to be listened to by the United Nations. The other thing is that we could think really of like for you to participate in webinars, either with me or with others. I really think that I will do everything I can to have you just need to tell me how would you like this to happen. But I think it's very important that that the media industry and there are good people in the corporate media industry, although they have done a pathetic job, and listens to you and creates a space for you. This is very important. And also we could try, last but not least, we could try to be present together in events. But again, I think that what I have in mind is more as seeing how to work together and how to walk together. The last point on diplomacy, it's not a very positive moment for diplomacy because it has shown the worst. I mean, for me, diplomacy is a noble term, despite its complex origins, and it's a way to avoid conflict, right? This is why people speak diplomatically, but diplomacy is a job, and is not working because it has been completely deflated of its meaning and its functions. So now, when I speak to diplomats, in reality, it doesn't change anything because they're just the conduit, the channel of the information. Eventually it capitals decide, which means diplomacy is not made by the diplomats surplus or at the United Nations. It's done by the political landscape and the main actors in the political landscape inside countries. This is why I say it's so important to be in France, to be in Germany, to be in the UK, and which doesn't mean that you will have to drop your life in Israel and travel, but just today we can do things remotely or by building partnerships. And if I have done it by myself and without means, without resources, anyone can do that.
Thank you. Hillel.
Thank you. We've been focusing on Western actors in global politics, Europe, North America. I wanted to ask Francesca if she can tell us more about non-Western actors, and particularly China. I'm interested to know, even though they have their own horrific human rights record, what do they think about Palestine, and now they're trying to become a world leader instead of the declining US. Would they use the issue, would they pick up the challenge and help the Palestinians?
It's a very interesting question, and thank you, Hillel, because while speaking, I also realized that I was focusing too much on the West, but because this is the constituency that is the most problematic, not the only one, but the most problematic. I have to say that looking at the let's say the global majority, the global South, there is so much that has started. Now, these 19 months have demonstrated that there are very few countries who can lecture others when it comes to respect for human rights. because the way I've seen Germany treating its own citizens, or my own country, or France, the way fundamental freedoms and rights have been crushed, journalists being arrested on count of on allegations of having of being in breach of the counterterrorism legislation for having spoken of Palestine. Today, France is, I mean, it almost achieved the suppression of the union, or the federation of all organizations, which includes Jewish organizations, in support for justice in Palestine, and it has happened in Germany. So yeah, of course, shall we compare to what happens in Sudan or in China? I don't know, but it's let's say that the usual countries who have lectured the rest of the world about the need to respect the rule of law and human rights have lost that primacy. What remains, though, and it's interesting, is that there are countries in the global south that are interested in maintaining, in respecting international law, because this is what sustains a healthy multilateralism, which is more honest than what the United States have been doing, which is pushing for multilateralism while constantly violating international law. I mean, I realized last year, as I was saying, Israel has systemically violated international law since 1967. And I said, it's not even the worst, because the United States have done the same. The United States is the country that has violated the most in international law when it comes, for example, to the to aggression and the prohibition of not prohibition, I mean, sustaining coup d'etat all over. So an infringement on the sovereignty of so many nations. So the discourse is complicated, but today I would start as a common denominator. I do trust the initiatives of some member states, like I don't know if you have heard anyone speaking of the Hague group. It's a country which asks for accountability, starting with activating, I mean, making sure that the ICC arrest warrants are executed, making sure that there is no weapons transferred to Israel that can be used in the occupied Palestinian territory, and no harbor for dual-use materials that can be used in the occupied Palestinian territory. It's pretty small, because the international obligations that stem from the ICJ advisory opinion on the legality of the occupation, or the ICJ provisional measures, are much more radical. I mean, it would impose much more radical consequences. But these are states that start little by little. So, however, it's still a small group of states. It's growing. Will it create a movement? Because rhetorically, so many countries are in support of Palestine, but eventually find one which has really stopped buying military service and spying services from, yeah, I see that Ada agrees with me. Yeah, but it's totally clear. This is why I insist on the corporate and private entities, because no one, if Palestine was a crime scene, it would have the fingerprints of all sectors of society, including charities. So it's very complex. Now, when it comes to China, I have to say that, but again, the process has started. So I think it will take time, but if we keep on pushing from all directions, we need to know what's the direction. And for me, the direction is yeah, I call it genocide. I understand that for some of you, this word is not appropriate, but however, and whatever is happening now, whatever the Israeli army is doing in Gaza, and the ethnic cleansing in the rest, because the West Bank is not spared. So end the occupation and end the apartheid. It doesn't have anything to do with two states, one state. This is something I've always said that Israelis and Palestinians should decide. But this, I mean, making rights a reality between the river and the sea depends largely on Israel right now. For this, I see that there is an increasing consensus. It's going to be difficult for Israel to be conceived in an unchallenged fashion the only democracy of the Middle East or the miracle startup nation, because people start to inquiry what these startup nations are. And voila. China, I don't know China much. I've not engaged. China is not one of the countries I've engaged much, because for a reason that has to do to practicalities, because China is, it's not that, I mean, you can have a country which is good on one sense and then has so many problems, not just internally for its human rights record, but in the region. And China is felt and feared by other countries in the region as this ever-expanding entity. And I'm because I've lived many years in Southeast Asia, I'm very close to Southeast Asian countries, also their mentality. And I do, these are my natural interlocutors. And in fact, they have taken steps, again, including us being part of the Hague group. But China could be, I think, is principled on the question of Palestine, unlike the United States. So it doesn't want to compromise the relations with Israel, but it doesn't want it to happen at the hands, I mean, at the expense of the Palestinians. This is the sense I have right now, and it's more for something. Again, and this is something I sense from how I read reality. Again, it's not my expertise, so take it cum grano salis what I'm saying.
Thank you. So there's before Andy has a question, but before that, I just want to read. Someone's question. She writes, as Palestinian woman studying and working in Israeli institutions, I have suffered and continue to suffer from silencing and self-silencing. I can't express my pain towards my brothers and sisters in Gaza. Therefore, I feel my ability to navigate and maneuver is extremely limited. And I think this is also something to consider as we kind of discuss what is it that we can do and who can do what when. Before I continue, I would just want to plug again, on the 10th of June, Hebrew University Academy for Equality's report on academic silencing, and so we're really dealing with this issue. And another plug is, if you are not a member now of Academia for Equality and have not paid your dues, this would be a good time to do so. Okay, Andy.
Hi, thank you, Francesca, for being with us and for answering the questions. I wanted to know, it's a question both to Academia for Equality and you. Eventually, I don't know if there are points where you can advise each other. Since the student movements in Europe are being so heavily, in the most fascist ways, crashed when they demand to cut ties with Israel, are there ways that Academia for Equality and our students in Israel can strategize with students in Europe who are fighting to cut ties with Israel? Like, is there a type of international academic boycott that would make sense for you, it is applicable, or you could envision? Or if there is a path towards a plausible way of joining forces and attempting this? Thank you.
Thank you. It's again another interesting question, because I have to say that if there is one thing that I've never agreed with of the boycott, was the academic boycott until last year. Last year, what made me change my mind was Maya Win's book. Again, sometimes it's just ignorance. Now I understand better. I mean, I don't know how you explain it, but when I see the repression of coming from universities themselves toward students, I say, what is this ideology? Again, it's financial interests. Because, for example, I was in Germany, and I was told that one university locked in students from this university and other university who had gone there to discuss, poor things, the importance of cutting ties with Israel, starting with a small partnership. And they locked the door, the university locked the door and literally kidnapped these people for 2 hours until the police came. So they called the police on the students. And I've seen it in Germany, the so-called Free University of Berlin, who canceled an event where me and Yael and I were supposed to talk. And then they called the police on the students who were watching the conference on screen. It's crazy. Then you go and see the budgets of these universities. There is one university in the US whose 40%, whose budget is funded for 40% by the military industry. And you know how what are the ties between the Israeli defense system and the US defense system. It boils down to this. This is why I say it's for us altogether, it's necessary to see what is happening in Israel-Palestine as part of a global process, where this is another stage of capitalism. And Yanis Varoufakis has explained it very, very well, saying, now we keep on thinking through the old century tools and categories, but here the power is in those who hold the clouds, and those who control the artificial intelligence. So who knows where we will be with all these things that I even struggle understanding. But going to the academia is part and parcel of the problem. And when I see the funding that from European Union Horizon go to Israel, to support what? Apart from the industry of the displacement and replacement, extraction industry, destruction sector of Palestinian homes, etc. The agro-business, it's incredible. But if you look at how much goes into the technology that then produces security tools that are needed. Again, this is what I was saying before. Israel is a tool, is a laboratory, not just Palestine. Israel is a laboratory for capitalist interests. And as part of it, if you see the system for what it is, you can fight it from within. And we will also fight it from within, because it's not that in our countries it's different, but eventually it's like breaking silos, you know? And we need to continue to do that. So it's very important to, for me, now academic boycott makes sense, but I would like this not to be limited to the institutions. And this is why an organizations like Academia for Equality is so important, because it allows your voice to be heard as a body without necessarily being the representative of university. You are the academic body, part of the academic body in Israel, and it makes total sense that you are heard. I think also the BDS is changing a little bit, although it has never been about the individuals. I mean, I know Israelis who are part of the BDS, but it's also open up to, I've been hammering so much, not directly, but at a certain point, I'm sure they've heard me say, and a speaking chair is better than an empty chair. And so, yes, normalization. Of course, I don't want to normalize the occupation and the apartheid, but I want to normalize humanity. I want to normalize this. And so, yeah, work in progress.
Thank you so much. That we have another question about how people can invite you to a webinar like this in their own groups, in different academic groups in different countries. So what do we answer to that?
An email?
Email.
Okay. An email.
Okay.
No, I would love to. So I'm so glad you asked, and definitely. So now I need a couple of weeks to get out of the tunnel of this damn report, because it's really suffocating me. But you will see there is so much to do for all of us once this is out, because this has been a huge endeavor. I mean, I have a brilliant lawyer who has coordinated the investigation. I have had like 20 researchers from different universities, academics contributing to it. I couldn't have done it by myself. And it's really like exposing yet another layer of the system. Again, it goes much beyond Palestine. But if we understand this, we will go to the root, really to the root of the problem. I still think that we can do good in this world, but it requires a lot of effort.
Thank you, Francesca. I think we're going to end here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you for your smart questions and for your clarity and energy. Watch the chat for more thank yous. And again, if anybody wants to join as a member, you have a joining form, and don't forget to pay your dues. Thank you. Good night.